Hello and welcome to the Spanish Football Podcast. I'm Phil Sid from Atleti. Sid Lowe is alongside me. Hello, Sydney.
Hello, Phil.
We are back in Rodilla, the low-budget sandwich chain. Shouldn't say that too loudly, actually, because they might hear us and get offended.
They might. I'm trusting that they don't understand enough English to understand low budget.
The wonderful sandwich chain that makes delicious sandwiches. You've ordered, what have you got
I
here?
haven't ordered anything, that's
Okay.
That's
All
producer
right.
out.
Al's got some rather ropey looking sandwiches there. Anyway, we digress, and we really shouldn't, because there is so much for us to talk about. It was an incredible weekend, matchday 31 in La Liga, full of drama, full of passion, full of quality, full of big games, and also Getafe against Atletico, which you went to. Possibly
It was really awful.
I mean, possibly the only bad game, because if you look down and we try and decide what games we're going to talk about, there are usually sort of 2 or 3 games that sort of fall by the wayside. This weekend, basically every game was huge.
Yes.
More or less.
Or at least huge things happened.
Yes.
Maybe the game itself wasn't, but huge things happened, yeah.
Let's go through the results then and give you some of the headlines from the results before we delve into exactly what happened in those games. The first match of the weekend was Girona 1, Espanyol 2. It was a freak own goal from Bono, the Girona goalkeeper, in the 91st minute, which gave Espanyol the victory. Sergi Darder shoots from distance, it hits the post, then goes off the post, rebounds onto Bono and back into the
Has it been
back
given
of the
to Bono?
net. Yes,
Okay.
it's an own goal from Bono. Christian Stuani scored the goal for Girona, who still haven't won at home since October. He scored 55% of Girona's goals in La Liga, which is the highest percentage of any player of any team by some distance in the Primera División. Myself and producer Al were at the Bernabeu on Saturday afternoon to witness Real Madrid 2, Eibar 1. It was, in what has been a season of poor first half performances, possibly the worst first half performance from Real Madrid. They rallied in the second half, particularly Karim Benzema, a really spirited and excellent performance from him. He scored both of the goals. He's on to 17 goals for the season. 15 of those have come from sides in the bottom 8 of the table. There was that stat which was tweeted by Mr. Chip. He has scored 6 headers though this season, and that is the most in the division alongside Christian Stuani. Rayo 2, Valencia 0. Valencia, of course, were on this 17-match unbeaten run, the second longest run in their 100-year history. So obviously they lost to the side who are second bottom of the table.
And a side who hadn't won in 15, I think.
No, not 15, but...
I think it's something like that. Maybe it's 1 in 15.
Yeah.
I think it might be 1 in 15.
Yeah, they'd had 7 defeats in their last 8 matches for Rayo, but it was a huge win for them. R.T. Raul de Tomas scoring his 13th league goal of the season. Huge win for Rayo. They are now, just 3 points from safety.
Yep.
It is so tight at the bottom of the table, though. It is going to be fascinating to see who stays up. Then you're at the Camp Nou. Barcelona 2, Atletico Madrid 0. Suarez and Messi wrapping up the game, and with it the league title. Diego Costa got sent off in relatively controversial fashion. We're going to discuss what he said to the referee, how it could be interpreted, whose mother he was pooing on.
Yeah, it's a fantastic Rincon Cultural list. The unpacking of swearing. Swearing is genuinely a window into a nation's soul, I think.
Yes, and the Spanish soul is full of poo.
Yes.
Yes.
But various other things as well, which we'll talk about when we get to it.
We will. Messi, by the way, becoming the player with the most wins in La Liga history. 335 wins. He overtook Iker Casillas, and it's going to be a long time before anyone catches Messi. Then on Sunday, the early game, Alaves 1, Leganés 1, 93rd minute equaliser for Leganés after a 93rd minute winner in their last game as well against Valladolid.
And after the goal that finally clinched against Getafe was also in the 93rd or maybe 92nd minute. Admittedly, they won the lap, but it's 3 games in a row, a stoppage time goal for Leganés.
Getafe 1, Athletic Club 0. Really poor game. Getafe stay 4th.
Lovely goal though.
Lovely
really
goal
nice
from Angel. Yes.
Yeah.
Then Valladolid 0, Sevilla 2. 2 late goals for Sevilla. 4 wins from 5 for them. They're just a point behind 4th spot, and they are really making up ground in the battle for a Champions League spot. We should mention, of course, and it would be very remiss of us not to talk about the fact that after the game, out of absolutely nowhere, Sevilla manager Joaquin Caparrós announced in relatively positive and bullish fashion, as is
very
his style.
Caparrós style, wasn't it? Yeah.
He said, I've got chronic leukemia, which apparently is easier to treat and not necessarily as serious as other forms of leukemia. I'm not an expert, but that's what they were saying on the radio. He's not going to have any treatment. He's going to continue as manager of Sevilla, but obviously he is not only the manager of Sevilla, but he is a really big figure in Spanish football over the last sort of 10 or 15 years, and we wish him all the best in his hopefully recovery, or at least dealing with this illness. A really important victory for Sevilla, a desperately disappointing result for Valladolid. I think I've said it before, I'm sticking by it, they are the worst team in La Liga.
Yes.
Valladolid. I mean, they're not even in the relegation zone, but they're the worst team in La Liga. Celta Vigo 3, Real Sociedad 1. Another comeback, 2 more goals for Iago Aspas. That's how we're doing it now.
Oh, are we giving
Iago
him both
Barry
names now? Barry is now his middle name.
Well, you know, a lot of people in Spain have 2 first names.
Yes.
So, you know, Jose Antonio, Luis Miguel, Iago Barry.
Yes, and equally, when you're a foreigner and you come here with 2 names, obviously in English terms we always see it as a first name and a middle name,
Yes.
and then a surname. They tend to make your middle name your first surname.
Yes.
It's infuriating. The amount of times I get phoned up and say, "Hello, Senor James."
Yes.
Who is this Senor James of whom you speak?
Yeah, that's happened with me, and my work email is my middle name. So it's.
Do you have a
so it's
suitably comic
P.
middle name?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. It's Harilaus.
So your middle name is literally hilarious.
Yes, it's literally hilarious.
Okay, fantastic.
Anyway, Barry inspiring another victory for Celta Vigo. They've got 7 points from their last 9 potential points, and he's got 5 goals and 2 assists in 3 games. I'm saying 2
In
assists.
1 week as
but
well.
Yeah, I'm saying 2 assists. I think one of them is him winning a penalty, which then he took and scored. But anyway,
Right.
Levante 2, Huesca 2 was at the same time as Celta Real Sociedad. By the way, that Celta game played in the absolutely pissing rain. It was
It gave
brilliant.
it a fantastically kind of epic feel, didn't it?
Yeah.
When Aspas was waiting for the penalty,
Yeah.
because it was going to VAR, the rain was coming down sort of in circles. It was swirling around wildly, and there were literally players hopping up and down on the spot trying to keep warm.
Yeah.
While Aspas is standing there in the middle of this biblical storm holding the ball. But more of a Iago later. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, it was the most Galician game I've seen in a
Yes.
long time.
Yeah.
Levante 2, Huesca 2. Levante twice ahead, twice Huesca came back. They remain bottom of the table. They remain 6 points from safety as they were at the start of this match, so a draw not really any good to them at all. Levante 3 points above the drop zone. They're very much in the relegation battle. They haven't won in 7. And then Betis 2, Villarreal 1. Santi Cazorla missing a late penalty. Absolutely heartbreaking for him, for Villarreal fans, and for anybody with a soul.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, we'll talk about that in a moment. So there we go. That's what happened in La Liga this weekend. We have to kick off by talking about the title decider,
Yeah.
which you were at for Barcelona's 2-0 victory over Atletico Madrid. Now, we mentioned, of course, the fact that Diego Costa got sent off in the first half, which absolutely conditioned how this game panned out. He got sent off for what he said to the referee. Now, there was a relatively innocuous challenge. I say innocuous challenge. It was a foul.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a terrible foul, but I think it probably was a foul. Yeah.
A foul was given
Yeah.
against him by the referee.
Well, it's the
Manfano.
challenge of Arthur on him.
Yes,
because the foul's
yes.
not given that
Yes,
he's so angry.
that's it. That's right. The foul is not given. He is very angry, and he says to the referee, "Me cago en tu puta madre."
According to the referee.
According to the referee,
Yeah.
there is currently a poll being conducted on Twitter by one of the Spanish radio stations. Who do you believe, Diego Costa or the referee? Because Diego Costa's version of events was that he was saying that "Me cago en tu puta madre," but not to the referee.
Yeah, so let's try and explain this, and I'm aware that we may have problems with censorship here, not censorship, with getting a star and being blocked in certain places. I'm going to try not to swear.
If you swear,
Yeah.
we don't go out on Indian iTunes.
Right, so
Okay.
I'm going to try and protect us so that we do go out on Indian iTunes.
Yes.
That phrase, which is very common in Spanish and is part of, and this is where we go, rincon cultural on you, that Spanish swearing has a whole variety of things that you can defecate on. Mm-hmm. And basically it's I defecate on whatever it may be, and there's all sorts of things. One of the bizarrest but one of the most often used is the milk.
Yes.
And I think we come into, when you talk about swearing, and genuinely swearing is a window onto a nation's soul or onto its culture, because obviously what is taboo is different in different countries. And so in Spain you see, in terms of the way that people curse, the way that people swear, an obsession with things that are motherly, an obsession with mothers, an obsession with mammary glands,
Yes.
an obsession with milk. And then obviously you get the religious element to it. So you get
God.
some of the things you can defecate on are God, the Holy Host bread, and so on. In this particular occasion, it is I defecate on your well, you can either translate this as the F word,
Yes.
or you can translate this more kind of more
Literally.
literally as I defecate on your prostitute mother.
Yes.
Now, Costa's claiming, and this is actually a phrase that people say before you say, well, that sounds ridiculous, why would anyone say this? People do say this. He's saying, I didn't say, I defecate on your prostitute mother. I said, I defecate on my prostitute mother. And basically, we're having an argument now in Spain about whether it's te or me, yours or mine. And to be fair to Costa...
Or me.
Yeah, te or me, yeah. To be fair to Costa... No, well, actually, that was the other argument, whether it's te or me, because then the other version of this was, actually, it wasn't me cago en tu puta madre, it was... Me cago en la puta que te parió. In other words, I defecate on the prostitute that gave birth to you.
Right.
So that's where it becomes te or me rather than te or me.
Okay.
I know it's ridiculous.
It is.
But it's also sort of funny at the same time. And to be fair to Costa, I thought to myself, when this comes out, this is the classic way out. This is the post-event trying to get yourself out of it. But if you watch the footage of him talking to the referee afterwards, you can see he's saying, mine, not yours, mine. And of course, that makes all the difference. And genuinely, I know it sounds daft because he's still swearing, he's still in front of the referee, the neck, the veins on his neck are still bulging. But actually, it does change it. At least in Spanish culture, it would change it.
It changed the game.
I think it did, although it's weird. I mean, first of all, I don't know about you. Simeone said after the game, I asked the referee at half-time if what he said was really so bad as to get a red card. And if what he said was what the referee says he said, then it's right that he's sent off. Now, I'm going to fundamentally agree with that.
Right.
And yet at the same time, there is a little bit of me that feels it's a pity that someone's bad temper in something they said can have such an impact on a game like this in general, not just with Costa, but in general. And for example, the Costa in a way sums this up. Costa in the 7th minute, forearm smashes Clement Lenglet, and nothing happens, and that's okay. But then he says a figurative phrase, because he's not literally going to go and defecate on the aforementioned mother. He then says a phrase that gets him sent off, and there's a bit of me that sometimes thinks, have we got our priorities wrong with some of these things? Because there are things that fundamentally matter less, and I'm not going to say they don't matter, because of course they matter, and there's all the question about, role models, there's all the question about not challenging an authority that we all need, and we need referees, and all those kind of questions. But there is a little bit of me that finds it a little bit of a pity. Anyway, all of that aside, as you say, it completely conditions the game. It does. I'd like to chuck a couple of caveats in, though.
Please do.
Caveat number one.
Right.
It conditions the game, but we don't exactly know how. And we also don't know whether it conditioned the result. So the best two chances that Barcelona make in the entire game, until Messi scores, because it's a better chance than one Suarez scores from, are both against 11 men.
Yes.
Barcelona played better for a lot of the game against 11 men. Now, that's not to say that it would have carried on like that. We don't know, which is another caveat. We just don't know how it would have developed. We don't know if it would have changed the result, because even if Atletico had been miles better, maybe they wouldn't have won. We just don't know that. I mean, bear in mind, this is a Barcelona team that hasn't lost in 19. 19 games now. 19 games now. So that's caveat number one. Caveat number two is, I think, a warning against extrapolating, as many people have done, from this card changed the game to this card changed the outcome of the league title race. And there's been a lot of that. I saw a headline that actually said, and I must admit, I love the headline, Diego Costa's verbal incontinence cost Atletico the league. Well, no, it didn't. Losing to Betis cost them the league, losing to Real Madrid cost them the league, losing in particular away at Athletic Bilbao cost them the league. And what really cost them the league was, and you can strip all the other elements away at times and say what's cost them the league and what's cost Real Madrid the league, is that Barcelona are better than both of them. I was going to say in the story then, but it's not in the story, and we've got loads more stories to talk about.
We do. I mean, do you want to talk about the sort of footballistic terms of how the game developed?
Because it was interesting. I thought Barcelona.
You were there.
I thought Barcelona. I mean, I'm conditioned by the fact I'm writing a match report, and that changes. I think sometimes the way.
Which means you don't really watch the game.
I think there's an element of that. There is always that small risk. Yeah. I thought Barcelona started very well, actually, very well. They create a wonderful pass from Messi. Alba hits the post. Lovely sort of nudged inside on the turn pass from Suarez. Coutinho produces a brilliant save from Oblak. Those are the two best chances that I was talking about. And they started well. Then the card happens. And Atletico did something very interesting, I thought, in terms of how Simeone dealt with it. He took off a fullback and put on an attacking player. And he moved Thomas to right back to give him the fullback and the midfielder in one. Now it's not quite the same because you can't actually be in both places at the same time. But Thomas is quite a good athlete. Fundamentally, he's a good passer and a good shooter of the ball. But he's not a bad athlete as well, and he was able to cover a bit of both. Later on, they made another change, which again was a fullback, Saul, going in at left back. And again, Saul is a really good athlete, covers quite a lot of the pitch. And I wouldn't go so far as to say they went for it, because they didn't. They sat quite deep. But when they did go forward, they were committing 4 or 5 men at a time. And again, I don't want to overstate the sense that they caused Barcelona problems, because I think that would be massively overstating it. But they created 2 chances: the back flip, the little back heel from Morata that got blocked by Longley,
right? Yeah,
and the header over the bar from Jimenez, which is from a set play.
Yeah.
So exactly my point. There's only 2, but it is true that the sensation was Atletico are managing this really quite well, and yet it's also true that Barcelona end up with 21 shots. 10 of them on target. Oblak makes 8 saves. All right, of those 8 saves, 3 or 4 of them are really quite easy. But there's 3, maybe 4 really good saves. The one where Messi shoots from the edge of the area and he's slipping and he saves it. The 2 that I've already, one of the 2 that I've already mentioned, one of which isn't a save, it's a post. The one where he comes out very close to Suarez and stops him. And Oblak was very, very good indeed. So this is all conditioned, obviously, by the numbers. We think it is. We'll never know for sure. But yes, of course, it is conditioned by that. In what way, we don't know. And I thought Atletico handled it really quite well. But it is certainly true that in the last 15, 20 minutes, Messi accelerated and started running at them. And they were worried by him, which is, I suppose, natural. And I suppose even more natural late in a game when you're tired and you're down to 10 men.
Absolutely. The only chance that I think Atletico had while it was still 11 against 11 was Antoine Griezmann.
Going on the right-hand side.
Yes, I mean, it wasn't easy. He hasn't scored in 13 games at the Camp Nou for Atletico Madrid and Real Sociedad. Obviously, if you want to be thought of as one of the world's greatest players, you probably have to deliver in these kind of big games, which maybe it's a bit harsh for someone to say that.
Yeah, in his defence, I would say I think he does respond in most big games. I would say that in a way, I mean, I've said this before, I see Griezmann as almost an even better player, partly because he's not assisted, partly because he is a player scoring this number of goals, providing this number of assists in a team that's largely not built to attack. Now, I think it's an exaggeration to suggest that Atletico Madrid are purely defensive, but they're not necessarily built to attack. And I think both Atletico Madrid and indeed France at the World Cup in the summer, I think while it might mean that Griezmann's overall productivity is slightly lower than others, I think he's doing it in a harder context than most players. And I think he's a brilliant footballer. And admittedly, he didn't have chances and didn't score at the weekend. I thought he played okay though, and I thought his reading of the game, I think he's a really bright footballer as well.
Luis Suarez's goal, which broke the deadlock, absolutely sensational. Another magnificent goal from him, having scored that extraordinary equaliser in the incredible game against Villarreal, and then Messi rounding things off.
I asked Valverde about Suarez, by the way. I said to him, is Suarez this player that sometimes you might think he's not playing well, but there's no way you're taking him off, because he's the guy that's going to pop up and score the goal? He basically said, well, exactly. But then he challenged me and said, well, I don't agree that he wasn't playing well. I said, okay, fair enough, but there's something of that in it. And I really like, I don't know if you heard him, Kiko Narvaez on the radio talking about Suarez, and he said, I think people are wrong about Suarez. And someone said, oh yeah, because it's not just the goals, he works really hard. He said, no, not wrong about that. We all know that. We all accept that. That comes as serie, what do you call that that comes as standard, I suppose you call that in English. He said, no, it's not that. It's that you look at him and you think he's clumsy, but actually technically he's brilliant. Some of the vision on the passing, some of the movement, some of the way that he plays others in. The touch to Coutinho is a good example. I know this is saying something that people know, but he's a brilliant footballer.
And he also scored the 54th goal scored by a Uruguayan this season.
Key stat.
Yes.
Because Stuani had made it 53 earlier in the day, right?
Absolutely. I'm looking at my notes here on my phone, and we've got absolutely loads to get through, and we've already rambled on a little bit. So let's move on, even though that was the big game with the big talking point from the weekend. Real Madrid 2, Eibar 1. It was really bad the first half. Obviously, you weren't there. You were watching.
I was trying to watch it on the train.
Very delayed.
Yeah, I mean, it was,
or 10, 15 minutes behind the stream.
It was amazing.
The first half was not good at all from Real Madrid. Very nicely worked goal from Eibar to give them the lead at half time. As we said, Real Madrid came out in the second half. They couldn't really have been much poorer than they were in the first half, and overall it did improve. And Karim Benzema leading the line, particularly with those 2 goals. He missed 2 extremely good chances and then hit the post as well. So we could have had
one that floated over the bar.
I mean, it was incredible.
It was an amazing miss.
It was an incredible,
genuinely impressive.
he could have had 3 or 4 or 5 goals on Saturday afternoon. He didn't, but he's on 17 for the season. As we said, 15 of those have come against sides in the bottom 8 of the table. 24 is his top scoring season. I think that was back in 2016. Let's see if he gets there. We've been saying for a while that it is pre-season now for Real Madrid. Obviously, Zinedine Zidane trying to motivate his players, saying that every game counts, and when you're at a sporting institution as big as Real Madrid, every game does count, not least because of the amount of eyes on you, the amount of pressure on you, the amount of words that are written about everything that you do. So they do have to put in a good performance between now and the end of the season, and yet
it doesn't count. And Zidane himself said this at the weekend. I think it's the first time I've heard him say it as bluntly as this. He said it's very hard to play well when you have nothing to play for. He'd already said, I think, after the West game, look, we're not going to win anything. I think he repeated that in midweek after the Valencia game.
I think he rectified it. He said it's very, very hard for us to win.
Yeah, and then he said it again this weekend. He said, look, we're not going to win anything. It's very hard to when you haven't got anything to play for. I also think we're in a situation, in theory at least, the players are playing for a place next season. But Zidane publicly keeps saying that's not the case.
No.
He publicly keeps saying this isn't a casting, as they call it in Spanish, even though it's an English word. And I wonder if that's filtering through to the players. I wonder if the players are partly disengaged because they're looking at this and thinking, actually, this isn't my key to a place next season. And this has become even more irrelevant than we thought it was.
There were 1 or 2 sort of interesting things that happened in the second half. Marco Asensio on the right-hand side, Lucas Vazquez playing on the left. Asensio actually played pretty well in that second half, along with an impressive Karim Benzema. But yeah, as we said,
that reinforces that Bale's going, doesn't it?
Well,
if they can find an exit for him, and it's not that easy.
Certainly, the reception that he got wasn't necessarily the warmest from the Bernabeu crowd. Not for the first time on what was, by the way, a very miserable day in the Spanish capital. It was peeing with rain.
I was,
and it was cold.
reading, I can't remember who it was now today, saying that Zidane had said at half time to the players after that terrible first half performance, in the second half you have to play well for all these people who've come out in the cold to watch you. Well, 30,000 empty seats suggests that not that many people came out in the cold to watch. Still 50,000.
50,000, yeah, just over 50,000. Let's move on and discuss a huge weekend at the bottom. Obviously, I mean, we should really talk about the game that you were at, Getafe against Atleti, but there wasn't really much to say. I mean, you were
except that Getafe are not going to give this up easily. They really are not.
As we said, they're a point clear of Sevilla in the battle for fourth. So at the bottom then, Rayo beating Valencia on Saturday evening in between the Real Madrid and the Barcelona game. Raul de Tomas scoring again. I've got here on our production notes that producer Al puts together, only Messi and Suarez have more shots on target this season than Raul de Tomas.
That's pretty good, isn't it? And this isn't a team that, alright, has been a team that's quite offensive despite it being down the bottom of the table. It's a team that does like to attack, but it's not a team that's providing masses of chances for him. He's the focal point of so much what they do, and we were discussing this, weren't we, a couple of weeks ago when we did that little poll on who is the single most important player for his team in La Liga. Messi, Stuani, Aspas were all really good shouts. Raul de Tomas is a very good shout for that. In terms of, obviously you have to look at it in the context of that team, but as a proportion of what they do that depends on him, it's enormous.
It was incredible because Rayo had taken the lead in 5 of their previous 8 games and not
4
won.
in a row.
Yes.
4 in a row and 5 of the last 8. It's crazy.
So they almost wanted Valencia to score the penalty that they missed. Rodrigo winning the penalty and Dani Parejo having his penalty saved. Rayo then took the lead, and certainly fans of Rayo might have been thinking, oh, maybe we should have let them score first because they're going to give this up. But they didn't. They hung on. Dimitrescu making some really important saves. In terms of Valencia, they've got a big weekend coming up with the Europa League quarter-final against Villarreal, and then the Valencia derby against Levante as well. A little bit of a Bajon losing, or sort of a downer losing that 17 match unbeaten run, but still they're still there.
Oh, they're definitely still there. I mean, the sensation of this, I think, is very negative insofar as having beaten Real Madrid.
Sensation is very negative.
Yeah, that's such a Spanishism. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
The feelings, I think are fairly negative insofar as the victory against Real Madrid, the fact that had given them, with those 2 games in a row when Getafe dropped points, 1 defeat and one draw, had given them the sense that right, the momentum is ours now. We just keep going and we'll get there. Then they have a weekend in which they don't keep going, they get beaten, Getafe win, and suddenly that gap reopens. And I think in that sense it would have done them some damage. But I don't think there's any doubt that they're confident that they're in good shape to compete for that final Champions League place, and they're now not the only one because with Sevilla's win, Sevilla in there as well, and I think Alaves probably we can start to rule them out, can we?
Yes, I think we certainly can. Marcelino getting abused by some Rayo fans.
I've seen one video.
There's one video.
I've seen one video which didn't look too bad, and there was another one which I've not had the chance to look at yet, which apparently is really awful.
Well, it's two
very, very pointed and very personal.
Two rather unpleasant men screaming.
Basically, I hope you and your wife die.
You should have died in that car crash because you had a pretty serious car crash. Any reason why Marcelino getting?
Yes. Yeah. The reason for this was that Marcelino was the manager of Villarreal when Villarreal were playing against Sporting at the final day of the season to avoid relegation. The other team that were trying to avoid relegation at the time, or one of the other teams was Rayo Vallecano, and we were at this game, I think.
We were. They won.
And Marcelino is from Gijón, a Sporting fan, has been at Sporting, and Villarreal lost, and there was a sense that this had been done deliberately, which was, and this explains, by the way, why it doesn't justify. It explains two very different concepts. This explains why they were pointing the finger at his wife as well, because post that game, his wife put out, I think, a Facebook post, maybe an Instagram post.
Facebook saying, we go home,
our work here is done, effectively. Yeah. And so, of course, there was this accusation that they deliberately lost to try and help his.
Well, that's why he lost the job, pretty much, isn't it?
Yes, because while there were some tensions already, Roch had effectively. He never quite said it explicitly, but he'd implied that there's a morality, or at least a facade that we have to maintain, an image that we have to maintain, which was damaged by this.
All right, let's move on and talk about Celta 3, Real Sociedad 1. Real Sociedad again taking the lead, so Celta again going behind at home, and again Aspas saving them.
I mean, let's just run through Iago Aspas. I've got it written down here. I'm just going to run through what Iago Aspas has done, because it is, I mean, I know we've talked about him a lot, and I know people know this, but it is absurd. In 3 months without Iago Aspas, Celta de Vigo won once, drew once, and lost 10 times, slipping from 9th to 18th. They were 4 points away from safety. In 3 games in a week, since Iago Aspas has come back, not fully fit, not really supposed to play 90 minutes, he has done the following. Game 1, scored twice to bring Celta back from 2-0 down to win 3-2 against Villarreal, another team in the relegation zone, so a massive game, and was kept on the pitch for longer than they planned to because they desperately needed him. When he was finally taken off 5 minutes ago, he sits on the bench sobbing, as we've talked about. Game number 2, which I was at in Huesca. Scores 1 and makes 1. Celta go 2-0 up against Huesca, another team in the relegation zone. Again, massively important. He's about to go off. Huesca score 3 times in 10 minutes to go 3-2 up. His manager, and I was watching this happen, comes to the touchline and says to him, "Can you hang on? We need you here." He says yes. He provides the assist to make it 3-3 and goes off immediately because he can't hang on any longer. They think he's injured, they think we're in big trouble here, but he comes back to play at the weekend. What does he do at the weekend? 3rd game in a week since coming back, scores 2 to take Celta from 1-0 down against Real Sociedad to 2-1. Maxi then adds a last minute goal, so it doesn't really mean anything. As I said earlier, the first was a penalty, which is made epic by this kind of swirling storm, which he won. He earned it, to use a Spanishism. He earns the penalty, he wins the penalty. He gets taken down by the goalkeeper, he scores. In fairness, it's not a great penalty, it slips under the keeper, and he skids off and everyone's delighted. Then he scores the second goal, diving in, crashing against the post, gets up, aquaplanes through the rain, takes his shirt off, goes crazy in front of the fans. Everyone goes absolutely bonkers. And then, of course, he then gets himself booked and he'll miss the game against Atletico Madrid. In a week, I don't think it's possible to do more, to be more of an idol, to be the greatest thing anyone's ever seen. Lord Barrington Aspas.
Yeah, well, there we go. Well, we don't have to talk anymore.
We don't say anything else.
Let's move on. Betis 2, Villarreal. Villarreal 1. Villarreal this week. Whoa.
Heartbreaking, isn't it?
They were 2-0 up against Celta, they lost 3-2. They were 4-2 up against Barça, they drew 4-4. They had a chance to draw against Betis, and Cazorla misses the penalty. There is the video of him afterwards, Calleja trying to cheer him up. He's looking distraught. I mean, he's looking at his phone, but he still looks pretty distraught. When he went off the pitch, several Betis players actually went over to him and had a word with him. I think the goalkeeper and Giovanni Lo Celso as well, who scored the goals that gave Betis the win, went over and said, come on, man, you'll be all right. You're all right, champ. Don't worry about it. It's all right. Everybody loves Santi. Santi himself put out a tweet today saying,
I've not seen that.
I've not seen it. It says, nothing can take away the feeling of of me letting everyone down. Like, that's how I feel. But I will raise myself. I'll get back on it because I owe it to all my teammates. But yeah, he was clearly pretty broken by this. I mean, he needs to get back mentally because he is so important to this team.
He's massive for this team. And, you know, I mean, he does owe something to his team in the sense that he missed a last-minute penalty which would have taken him out of the relegation zone, and it was a very poor penalty. He went straight down the middle. Pau didn't move.
Yeah.
I mean, Pau caught it.
Yeah.
He didn't just save it. He caught it. You expect him to move. But the curious thing was, as Cazorla ran up, he was very, very still, Pau. So you could sort of see that he might not move, which is why it was such a surprise. And maybe it was just kind of a battle of wills. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to force him to go. So I suppose he does owe them in that sense, but he doesn't owe them anything in the sense that he's been probably their outstanding player this season. He's been quite a lot better than most of them. You know, he's been kind of keeping them afloat at a time when perhaps a lot of them haven't. But yeah, I really, well, I mean, we hope this anyway because it's Santi, but I mean, after that, even more so, you kind of hope that, well, you really hope that he comes through this and that they, you know, they can come out of the relegation zone. Trouble is that whenever you say that, of course, you're implicitly putting someone else in it, which isn't entirely fair.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, all three sides that have been, or sort of four sides that have been in and around the relegation zone.
You sort of want them all to come out, don't you?
And they're all showing a lot of fighting spirit. The ones that aren't are Valladolid and Levante.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose you could say it's starting to look like Girona might be properly dragged into that as well.
Well, Girona are in it now as well, but that's because of their abysmal home record.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Espanyol went there this weekend. They'd only won once all season.
It was
away
guaranteed
from home.
to be a draw, wasn't it? And it didn't happen.
Yeah, incredible. A lovely goal, by the way. The first goal by Sergi Darder.
Yes.
And as we said, the second one was given as an own goal. And Espanyol in mid-table mediocrity again. This is where their natural order is. That's
It
where
does
they
seem
are.
like
They just tread water in mid-table. And Girona are sucked in to the relegation battle, which looks like we don't have a title race, but we do have a battle for fourth, and we do have a relegation battle.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there is still reason for you to listen
There's
to
loads
us.
of reasons, and obviously, I think our listeners know I'm a bit of a weirdo. But
Yes.
these kind of things excite me almost more. You know, relegation battles and battles with teams that you don't expect sort of excite me even more than title races. In part, and this is not Barcelona's fault, and they are partly a victim of their own success, they've made winning the league not routine as such, but they've made it look comfortable, and I think actually that denies them some of the appreciation they probably deserve for what has been an extraordinary decade. This will be their 8th league out of 11, and in the 3 they didn't win, on only one of those occasions did they not go to the final day with a chance of winning it.
Yeah.
Now, they have competed for 10 of the last 11 leagues.
I think I saw a tweet from someone that was retweeted. It wasn't someone that we follow or I follow, but it was a Barcelona fan who was saying it's incredible that Valverde isn't given the respect that he should be from Barcelona fans, given the fact that since he's been manager, Barcelona in the league haven't lost to Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, I think it's Valencia, Sevilla, and Real Sociedad, who were their bogey team.
Yeah.
Now I might have added one or two, but that's
that'd
basically
be
it.
right, because last year they only lost once, which was away at Levante in that amazing 5-4. They've lost twice this year, which is Leganés and Betis.
Yeah, so that's it. They haven't lost to any of those sides with Valverde as the manager, and still.
Basically, they've had one really terrible day, which was Roma, and that's enough to destroy them.
Yes.
Admittedly, there's a broader question about the sensations, about the feelings. That's a Spanish thing. I've done it again about that sense of, you know, how good are they really? But if they're not very good, then no one else is even half good. No one, because genuinely, right? Forget the statistics. The statistics are massively overwhelming. You know, over the last 2 years, they have an aggregate 30-point lead over Real Madrid over the last 2 seasons. I know what it would be over Atletico would be 24, I think, or 25. Even if you take away those stats, which in themselves are really telling, just watch the games. Barcelona are better than anyone else. They might not be as good as their own version of perfection, if you like, but they are better than anyone else. There's no doubt about it. I saw a funny tweet which I saved because, well, I say funny. It sort of made me laugh a little bit because there's this great phrase that you get in Spanish. It goes, "Oh, who's the worst team to have been at the Bernabeu this year?" Or "Who's the worst team to have been at the Camp Nou this year?"
Yeah.
And there was this great phrase. That said, "The worst team to have been at the Bernabeu this year is Real Madrid." And there's something in that.
Well, I mean,
it's a joke and it's tongue in cheek, but there is something in that. And it's been, you know, it's been a desperately poor season, but fundamentally, from Real Madrid, but fundamentally the reason Barcelona have won the league is because they have actually, for all the doubts about them, for all the criticisms, they've actually been really quite good.
Yes. All right, listen, we're going to leave it there. We're about to record, though, our Q&A podcast for patrons over at patreon.com/TSFP. We're going to take questions on the future of Rafael Varane. Could Raul de Tomas take a place in Madrid's squad next season? Are there problems in the Villarreal dressing room? And a question about Oviedo, obviously. A few more about the whose mother were we pooing in debate, and what should we do? What should someone do
with a drunken sailor?
No, if you head to Bilbao for a game. So there we go. If you fancy listening to more of that, come and join us at patreon.com/TSFP. Before we go, we should tell you that we're up for an award. Thank you to the Football Blogging Awards for nominating us for the Best International Content Creator. You can vote, if you like, on their website, footballbloggingawards.co.uk.
And if you really like, you can vote for us.
I'm telling you, yes, well, indeed. footballbloggingawards.co.uk. So if you like it, if you think that we are the best international content creators amongst the list of very talented people that are there nominated, vote for us. But if you think someone else is better, please
then
feel
don't
free.
vote.
We've also just finished our latest TSFP Presents series for patrons, discussing the best and biggest transfers in La Liga history. If you haven't already, you can listen to a free clip of our last episode on some of the worst ever signings. It's on this podcast feed and on SoundCloud as well. We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for listening. We're back soon. Adios.
Cheerio.